You don't know how great I am. You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free. You don't know how great I am.
Yo, check this. I might not be what you want me to be, so you might not see what you want to see. But if you got a minute, listen to what I gotta say, cause it's a brand new year and it's a brand new day. See, there's a gap between my culture and the life that I lead, so some will call me an apple, and some a bad seed. They have no idea how my heart will bleed. Their words and attitudes are things I just don't need.
You don't know how great I am. I am what I am, and I am free.
You see, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of where I'm from. Those ones spreading racism, they're just fucking dumb. Now if you're looking at my life, and you say I've assimilated, you simplify things, just a little more complicated. See, I'm a modern day native, with a modern day life. I have modern day problems, and modern day strife. Now I hear other natives, they talk about the past, and will I do the same? Fuck that. See, I've got no time to dwell on what's already done. I've got too many things that I want to do. And they don't include knives, and they don't include guns. I'm talking about knowledge and sharing it too. See, my people need to learn how to cohabitate, get rid of the anger, and get rid of the hate. We gotta stop for a minute and learn to educate. And you'll see in the end, we all have to communicate. I know there'll be a time to make a stand and a time to fight, but if you do that, make sure the cause is right. Because if the cause is right, and the cause is just, greater numbers of people will be backing you up. History has repeatedly shown to us all that united we stand and divided we fall. They were talking about natives and natives alone, because this is a big world, and this world is our home. Now I've seen some beautiful people, and ugly ones too, and there's no single color that comes into view. So the message I'm sending, it's not all that long. It's just, I want the human race to be stronger than strong. I said I just want the human race to be stronger than strong.
You all have to be strong.
Done it. Word.
We all have to be strong. Peace.
Sigoli swagwag, Galahindi Neo Gets, Wagi Sliwagi, Niwakintaloda, Unida Ugwe Wenage, Ani, Bojo, Danse, Okinapi, How, Yanko, Yugo Donlos. So, for those of, hey, morning, Lasu. For those of you who are here for the first time or don't know what I said, I always introduce myself in the original language. So I said, Sigoli Swagwag, or hello everyone, Galahindi, Neo Gets. So Galahindi is my name. It translates to clouds passing over in the colonial language. And I'm a member of the people of the Standing Stone First Nations here on the northern part of Turtle Island, the part that's been segregated and relabeled Canada. And I'm on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Delaware, and Huron nations on the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Treaty territory. It's probably the longest running and only treaty that was truly actually adhered to by the people who created it. And it was created amongst the indigenous people of this area so that we would share the resources of Mother Earth is providing to us, that, such as the medicines and the foods, and we only took what we needed to take from those resources. So that was part of the treaty, and that so that we could all kind of remain sustainable and living on this Mother Earth. Today, I'm going to share a couple of talks. They were done as part of what we call the Global Resilience Summit. It was a 6 day conference that had experts and people from all various backgrounds and professions and specialties. And in some cases, um, we found that they decided this year anyway to put all of the indigenous artists on day 6. So anybody who wanted to hear um, perspectives from an indigenous angle, they only had to come to one day, and they got to hear all of the speakers. So I'm going to share two of them today. One of them is now I know I'm not going to say their names properly. But Tiokasin, our Ghosthorse, is going to be speaking about the relationship with Earth and our need to recognize our dependence on and interdependence with the source that provides everything unselfishly for us. Now, Ghosthorse is a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota and has a long history with indigenous activism and advocacy. He's the founder, host, and executive producer for the syndicated nationally and internationally First Voices Radio for the last 28 years. So in 2016, he received a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize from the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. The second speaker we will listen to will be a climate justice activist named Xiye Bastida, and she's going to speak with Sandy Inkster about the climate crisis being the biggest challenge that we've ever faced, which means it's also our biggest opportunity to come together. So she notes the value of having a cross-sectoral, intersectional, and intergenerational conversations to promote engagement in addressing the climate change, and how COVID-19 pandemic caused a shift to a more effective work within that movement. And she's an 18-year-old Mexican activist. And so we're going to hear her talk today. So I hope that you've all got your coffees and your drinks and are ready for the first one. I will do a little break in between the two speakers just to give people an opportunity to grab another snack or a drink or whatever it happens to be that you want to do. So we're going to start. We'll start with the with Ghosthorse, who is from the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota. So I'm going to get this started. So what I want to do first of all is let's see here if I can get this off my screen. I'm going to take my mug off the screen here and go into this folder. We'll get this started.
Hi, welcome to another session on day 6 of the Global Resilience Summit, where we're focused on listening to the earth through indigenous voices. I'm your co-host for this session, Fleet Mall, and I'm really excited to be here today with my friend Tiokasin Ghosthorse. How are you, Tiokasin?
I am good. Thank you, Fleet.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm going to read a bit of your bio to familiarize our audience with you, and then we'll jump right into the conversation, okay?
All right.
Great. So Tiokasin Ghosthorse is a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota and has a long history with indigenous activism and advocacy. Tiokasin is the founder, host, and executive producer of the syndicated, nationally and internationally syndicated First Voices Radio. for the last 28 years. In 2016, he received the nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize from the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. Other recent recognitions include Native Arts and Cultures Foundation National Fellowship in Music 2016, National Endowment for the Arts National Heritage Fellowship nominee 2017, Indigenous Music Award nominee for Best Instrumental Album 2019, and National Native American Hall of Fame nominee 2018 and 2019. He also was recently nominated for nominee for 2020 Americans for the Arts Johnson Fellowship for the Artists Transforming Communities. He was also awarded New York City's Peacemaker of the Year Award in 2013. And by Tiokasin's own account in his bio here, he is a perfectly flawed human being. You can find First Voices Radio at firstvoicesindigenousradio.org, and you can learn more about his work at Akantu Institute, www.akantuinstitute.org. Okay, so again, welcome, Tiokasin. And today, our focus is on listening to the earth. We had a day on looking at climate change and climate resilience, day 4 of the summit, and we talked to scientists and activists and policymakers and so forth to understand, where we are scientifically, where we are in terms of raising people's awareness, where we are in terms of affecting policies that could really get us to a carbon neutral economy, things like that. And today we want to really focus on a kind of deeper conversation about, how we can really begin hearing what our First Mother, the Earth, our planetary home, is communicating to us, and really deeply shift our relationship to the earth, to each other, and really begin to realign ourselves. We've gotten so far out of alignment from the original ways of being on the planet. So I'm curious, just that idea of listening to the earth. What comes up for you with that phrase? Does that make sense to you? Listening to the earth, and what would come up for you?
It half makes sense. Listening to the earth, it's half of the circle. And I feel that we have to nurture an environment, for lack of a better word, is, I find that we only go halfway when we're saying we have to listen to the earth. And it's fine. I get the total, if you go a little bit further with thinking, but really, maybe we shouldn't be listening to the earth. Maybe we should go and observe how the earth listens to us. And if the earth listens to us, then it's shown by example, not instruction or how to do something. And often I go to outside and I'm not going to listen to the earth. I hear the earth. And so it's really telling me already how it's listening to me. So I think part of that whole idea is being able to metabolize with what is already. And I think this is why we need to complete our thoughts, because all the nurturing that we do in this body actually comes from the earth. And I say that is the earth, let's put it this way, that the earth doesn't charge us for water. The earth doesn't charge us for food or, sustenance or air. It doesn't charge us for anything. So we haven't gone that far beyond our economic minds and material minds to know that maybe this is what we should be doing with ourselves. But humans need this government, this rule, this domination for some reason. But there's a lot of people on this earth still living with this earth that also understand what I'm talking about, that she answers every prayer, every wish. She gives freely. And this is the part that we forget is, wow, we forgot how to do that. We've come up with terms as sharing, giving a part of so that you get a reward back for it. So it becomes a possession. And I think that's what gets in our way, this mind junk of possession. And this is where we don't know how to listen to the earth, because we think we go to the earth in a benevolent form. we're superior, we're supreme, we're dominant, we have knowledge and information. But wisdom is not because of knowledge and information, it's experience with Earth, because at the same time, the Earth is experiencing you. And that's the transmission of truer knowledge, which is wisdom. Yeah.
Well, I always know I can count on you, Tiokasin, to get us out of kind of linear, oversimplified approaches with language and so forth. And we'll keep exploring that. So what I hear you say, I think, it's waking up to the fact that the Earth is a living system that we're part of, right? We're not separate from the Earth, and our hubris has allowed us to think we're not only separate from the Earth, but we can dominate the Earth. And we see aspects of it as maybe living and other aspects as inanimate. And we've lost sight of the fact that it's a living system that we're not separate from. We're made of the very same elements that the Earth is. And maybe it's about really just waking up to who we are, that we're really just beings within this living system that is the Earth, and that we could be back in relationship with a lot more humility. And maybe it's also about listening to ourselves, because our own bodies are of the Earth. So, there's a famous quote from Einstein that goes something like, you can't solve problems with the same mindset or the same thinking that created them, right? And so it seems like maybe not only do we need some radical mind shift and heart set adjustments, we modern humans, but it's even our mindsets are embedded in our language. Our modern languages are so inherently dualistic and objectifying. And I know that indigenous languages are quite different, your Lakota language in particular. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how we can begin to sort of get out of these limiting boxes of the way we think and the way we speak and the way we even conceptualize how to address a problem or challenge that we're facing. That somehow the shift has to come at a deeper level, I suspect.
Yes, it is. It is deeper, and yet it's not, because when we think about the myth of human thought process, we don't go any further than the information that we gather. So we can feel our worth out of the information we gather, and we apply that to books and how to live amongst each other. But really, the information is distancing us from actually living with the Earth, because the Earth has given instructions. So the Earth is not showing us how to, but we tend to be benevolent in that form and take our myth of progress to all other forms that is not I would say Western in this case. And I'm thinking about, there's has been a concerted effort, and since our experience from 1492, if to read more about Native people, a concerted effort to dismiss, have a short conversation, or their knowledge doesn't count, doesn't matter. It's part of the primitive aspects that we cannot use in this modernity. But yet the relational aspects that remain among all of us also include those who think rational languages. So, and I'm going back to the Earth, understanding that the Earth is also, adjusting to us, looking at us and saying, okay, that one needs this and that one needs, in all the forms. And in her intelligence of non-rationalizing, no agenda, not even a language to communicate with the way we do, which we think is intelligence. It doesn't need to think. It doesn't need intelligence. It just is, and that's beyond the scope of this language that I know of. We get closer with those cultures that have been living with the Earth sustainably for 100,000 years old, and yet our reference points are 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years old out of Western democracy, Greece and Rome, and a little bit further than that. So, the reference points get in the way. It has to do with civilization and the accumulation of information called knowledge. But that knowledge and information is always changing, and we never can catch up to the Earth. So why are we using our so-called logical intelligence to think that we are going to ever be able to listen to the Earth with this type of thinking? And my experience is being with the Earth and not thinking at all. just one huge ball of energy. And where is that energetic form of language besides conceptual or even precept setting up concepts? And that, therefore, you have sort of this train, like a train thinking, one car after the other, and it comes in concepts. Well, that has a beginning and an ending. And if you're into the quantum physics of the Earth, she has no ending because she's in concert, in cohesion and coherency with all other cosmos, the cosmos that's going on everywhere, even inside ourselves. So the language, that barrier that keeps us from understanding this is basically the dominance and the possession of knowledge and information, because we can get greedy with information and knowledge, and that becomes controllable and manipulated. And so we find the cause and effect, the right and wrong, the better or worst, and we accept this type of warlike language, conflict language, so easily because generations before 1492, that's what was going on in another land, maybe for perhaps 200 generations before coming here. And as far as I know, there are nations and tribes that only have 150 to maybe less than 200 years of experience with this type of thinking. But that is looked down on because it's not based on new thinking, new invention. So we're fooled by the fact that that formula that Einstein, that you said Einstein, you can't use the same language to wake up with, because this is the same language that put you to sleep in the first place. And so this is what I'm saying. And a lot of people don't want to go deep into that subject because they know that it's beyond their knowledge, beyond their conceptual thought process to ever understand what Mitakuye Oyasi is all about. All these other terms that have been with us, these 15,000-year-old songs, even more so, to always try to dismiss or culture. How do you say it? Canceling culture, because that's the way of this country, and that thought process is to always go back to the drawing board and say it's new, it's brand new, spanking new. Well, what happened to the one you just used? It's like a throwaway society, a throwaway invention of the latest trendy thought process, and that book's outdated, so we'll go to the next one. Well, behind all this movement, Fleet, is the motion of the earth. So this is why I say we're one or two steps out of rhythm of the earth or behind the earth. And what about those societies that are not relying on the accumulation of information or materialism, that mind junk of trying to keep that all together, the legal terminology, the constitutional terminology, the science, the scientific terminology, religious terminology, and all that sort of dogma gets in front of that heart, when all it is that we're not understanding the innocence that who we really are, and we tend to try to how would I say this? Every moment is innocent, and we try not to put mind junk in front of that. You see, and these are simple terms, simple terminology, but I'm not going to get all academic so that people like what I say. Is no, we have to go be simple with what we're feeling, not what we're thinking to feel. Yeah.
Well, I think all the world's contemplative inner traditions within indigenous societies, but also within some of the other deep contemplative traditions, have kind of seen the thinking mind is the problem. It's a useful tool, but it's the problem when it dominates. And so a lot of the practices are, how do you get out of conditioned mind? How do you, get into non-thought, actually? And traditionally, one of the ways of doing that is to get out in the natural world, because when we're in the natural world, we tend to quiet down because of the majesty, the power, our connection with the natural world. We naturally quiet down. So maybe that's the avenue that instead of ramping up all this thinking to try to figure it out, maybe we all need to quiet down And maybe there's a language of the heart that's non-conceptual, that's not linear, that maybe would bring us back into right action and right relationship with the earth.
Yeah, I do. I think, I could probably say that to me, religion is like this belief system. And when Native people don't have a word or explanation for religion, because it's older than religion, and we could say spirituality, but then spirituality is trying to define what religion maybe is. And so this belief system, the earth is not a belief system. And that this belief system of religion and science and government, um, they extract your relationship from the consciousness of earth, if I could say that. It leads you into this monastic oneness and actually places you into this vulnerable situation where you are constantly looking for connection. So it's trendy to say, well, we have to connect and connect, and we have to go from the mind to the heart. And then you spend the rest of your life rationalizing why you feel lost and dazed and confused, because that belief system has consumed any chance of understanding and replace it with ritualistic knowledge. And so constantly we're looking to go to the heart. But I know of many indigenous languages that can't even fathom trying to go to the heart, except that coming from the heart makes more sense. Coming from the heart, going to the mind. So in another way, we're trying to quiet the mind to listen to the heart, but the heart is always listening anyway to that little baby thing going called the mind. And so it's a symptom of believing that we have become benevolent and that we can perform miracles. But and in that mindset of possession, that we've appropriated those cultures that have no word for religion. And like plants have no religion. Earth doesn't have a religion, nor do indigenous peoples, because they have all evolved and moved past this antiquation of belief. So to me, the earth is real, not a belief system. Mystery is real. And we are always trying to, in a Western way of thinking, we're trying to solve mystery, save it, or get rid of it, or science it to death. And this all gets in the way, it becomes mind junk. And so I think there is this opening, this, if you say opportunity, then that's where we're at right now. And that the control of the resources, if we let go of that, I think that means we have to let go of trying to control the earth and extracting. So I'll put it in the context of the earth is running out of the minerals, the metals to create more technology. So once it's out of those metals and minerals or whatever we're using to make our devices and seem like we're intelligent because we can kill earth and kind of make it shiny on the outside for our technology, then there's that, using the same formula that you described earlier. And indigenous peoples, and I'm not trying to put us on a pedestal, I never try to do that, is that we are having to watch this happen, and yet saying, look, this is not the way. This is not the way of the earth. It's the way of the human. And the human has come up with religions to kind of soften the effect of the destruction. And out of that, we look for exoneration and more or less salvation point mentality. And so we're always looking to save something ourselves, looking for someone to save us. And yet we're not really understanding the simple energy that's happening every day, every second, the innocence, like I talked about, the innocence every moment, except that we tend to we tend to clutter our minds up with that junk I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk more about the way of the earth, if you will. You talked about coherence before, and the Earth has its rhythms and its cycles and its seasons, and it's spherically shaped, and the circle I know is important within indigenous cultures, and I wonder if you could what might be some ways to point us towards reconnecting with the way of the Earth instead of the way of the human mind or the conceptual mind, perhaps.
Well, if I can bring the obvious difference between time and the concepts that is coming out of the Julian Gregorian calendars and all those calendars that were invented, and yet those calendars are dated around they center around 2000 years ago, AD and BC. And you find that many indigenous peoples are going, what? And we look to the stars for our calendar. The stars are our calendar, not so much like in astrology. We understand that so much, at least I do, without having to go into scholarly, scholarly research about are they right or are they wrong. No, this is their stories that there is a Pleiadian calendar that we know is still in effect. And that has no time. It's too big for a Julian or a Gregorian calendar. So the atomic clock, I guess, is the closest that could come to any. If there is a calendar like such as the Mayan, the seasonal calendar that is not 365, 24/7. It depends on each location that people are and human beings who think about watching the stars. That's the calendar. So the story goes that if in the Lakota way, if you stop counting the stars, then it will all come to a big change, or even an end, if I could say that. So you have people out there that I know, Lakota, that are still counting the stars because the stars are always changing and trying to keep in rhythm and balance the energy that's coming from these places. Now, that language is so immense that we can't squeeze it into the restricted, and I call it the parabox. The parabox, such as a paradox, is having a beginning and an ending. As a superior and a inferior, the top and bottom, better or worse. And then it also has a cause and effect. So it's built a box of reasoning and rationale that everybody is trying to fit into, because the nature of this box is extraction. And to take everybody else's mind, cultural ways, even cultural mores, to make itself feel better, but it has to do it on a constant basis, where other cultures are outside of this box, having room for this box, and knowing that it's part of the whole, the Medako Yoyasi. So I think we are all born with this, and we lose that consciousness at a certain time because of our ritualistic knowledge that has been applied to. This is how you do things. Even amongst the native people nowadays, the modernity has affected us so much that we don't even know. I woke up this morning I'm good to be indigenous, right? Is that saying? Because I can never wake up and say it's good to be a colonist. And I wonder how that would go across with people who it's hard for them to say. I wake up and I'm a colonist. It's good to be a colonist. And maybe that's the thinking that we have to look at, and to go deeper is, wow, I can never get up and say it's good to be indigenous. But then we have to look at the history. Then we have to look at the treatment of the earth, and one culture and societies born out of civilizations, and how we are getting further and further. Every generation is getting away from that basic thinking that we are all born with. Every person, but the efficiency of this other thinking that's come in to extract you away from the connection has actually no exit strategy from it. So the cold turkey that's coming with the earth is not wanting any of us to go away, but to realize, to wake up, as you say. But it's not this language is that going to wake us up. It's the energy you and I exchange here. You know, I could say faith-based, but that's too easy. It just, we get even that belief system out. We see that, wow, is the earth and the universe having faith in us? Are we that arrogant that we can think that that is what's going on? And if I make myself clear, is that we are so anthropocentric. We don't know the etymology of our culture as well as our language. And we just keep repeating the same old circle that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You spoke a little earlier about, I think something you said about the innocence of each moment, and seems like there could be something of, returning to that original innocence for each of us, because we learn everything you've been talking about, these extractive and conceptualizing and dominating ways of thinking and being that have led to all of our current challenges. We're not really born that way, I don't think. It's learned. And so something about how do we kind of return to that original innocence and just in the moment, like, this moment right now, you and I are here together, and we could maybe relax into something. It's like we would want to, well, original innocence, what's that? Can I package it, and then can I market it as a product, and how long does it last? We just keep thinking that way. So is it in something about being in the moment, and something about trusting in something about our original or nature or something, and so that we don't just immediately get caught in this whole other way of being and thinking?
Yeah, I tend to think, first of all, because I was taught how to think in this society, pretension manners, and yet on behind that was the gloom and doom. If you don't do something, this is going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think how I was programmed, re-educated, re-interned, and away from my respect for fire, my respect for water, the earth, and for the wind. These are the elements that I grew up in when I was younger, and they took care of me, and I didn't have to think. So when it came to the thought process of even, Descartes says, "I think, therefore I am." When it came to that, that's the hardest thing for me to understand, because that was the American way to think about what intelligence is all about. And I think about, who tried to redefine us. It was so many. It came from all directions, and I think about a child growing up in this system, that how we were viewed as Native people is the same way they are viewed if you don't follow the rules. And I'm taught that the duty is to work. Go to work and get your value from your work. And the system of that tribe is not there anymore. How am I saying, the tribal reservation system that's going on now, it gives to the individual no incentive to labor. So therefore you're considered lazy. And I haven't had an uncle who would wake up in the morning, he had no job, he didn't go to any work, and he didn't earn anything. He woke up in his log cabin, he got up and made sure his family had food. And think about sustainability of a garden, how you kept the garden, you saved, you put everything and preserved it, and you knew how through nature to keep food through the hard winter months. So he got up and made the fire. He made sure there was more wood for the fire so that the family was warm and that they were okay fed. And he got up and he left, and he went to an elder, and he did the same thing, and he sat down and he waited. And he waited and heard these elders tell him the story. And that was his education. And he'd go to the next elder. And and make sure that everybody was okay. Then he'd come home. Now, that man was called lazy because he didn't earn the money, he didn't get an education. And I'm like, wow. But he made sure everybody was okay. That basic human being principle, not just a human to, to that's based on fashionable value of money, so or education from the West, right? So, um, but that's what was we were we were forced to labor like slaves, and that was supposedly was our well-being when we got up from 8 to 5 or whatever that was, and you come home, you didn't have time to do anything else but so tired that you went to sleep. But in far as a lot of nations were concerned, that this egotism, exalted egotism that comes from American civilization, to say I, right? This is paraphrasing something, to say I instead of we, and this is mine instead of this is ours. And but it's hard to learn the I part. Even today, it's difficult to talk about myself, which I can do more so, um, and not listen to the content part of us. Let me alone, because that if you're not doing anything, then you're not of any service to a civilization. And so, in the resilience, um, uh, protesting, and in other words, we're resilient to that's what is being done to the earth and the destruction of the earth, and to people in that that innocence inside all of us. And so when a native person or anybody who's lazy, they're bad people, they're bad, they're just bad. And then the government has the obligation or to show the civilized way, and how citizens do this in order that we can all get along. So the assimilation process happens to all of us. And in the native way, that what we've shown is like, wow, we have this other way of being, all of us, the earth, the animals, air, all of these these beings that walk the earth, and involving them in our language, always involving the creation stories that are always all going on. And that's the welfare, that's the true health of the welfare of the earth, instead of the extracting of it, is that you really understand that you don't need too much to be happy. And we've been on this road to nowhere about trying to be happy with materialism, and it's driving us crazy, and we continue to do that. And I think part of this is it's stopping, slowing down. And it's like, wow, is it difficult for me to try to express things as if I'm not trying to criticize do's and don'ts, or don't do this. It's more like there's another way to do things. It's another way to do things, and that other form to force other people to think the standard way of controlling, the standard way. This is how we all do it in order to get along. That's this. I would say I go to the other part is it's a form of genocide. It's a form of genocide to try to force people to think one way. Because it's even more so to, I think you mentioned that there are people who think or can talk several languages. Even the indigenous people still today can talk different indigenous languages, including the foreign languages, Spanish, English, Portuguese, all these other foreign languages. And I think, wow, how can an uneducated person do that? It's because they have the experience with them, with the other peoples that walk the earth, and so the same way you should extend out to the earth. They are experiencing you. When you're hearing a bird call, they're experiencing you. But we forget, that's a nice sounding bird call. We're all that they're supposed to be there for us, right? And yet we don't understand that we're supposed to be there for them, you know,
Mm,
and that puts us in a good place. Yeah.
yeah. Well, a lot of what you're saying just keep pointing away from this anthropocentrism that we're plagued with back to humility and simplicity and so forth. I'm curious, you've had a traditional upbringing and education, and at the same time you've had a Western education, and you live kind of out in the modern world. How have you balanced those two worlds for yourself? How has that worked out for you? Is there an ongoing tension there, or an integration, or are they just kind of two parallel realities? How does that work for you?
I think it's the best place to be right now, because this was what was given to me from the get-go, since I was born in a place where there was no water. I mean, excuse me, no plumbing, no electricity, no cars, no telephone, in a log cabin where it was against the law to be born outside of the Indian Health Service, the public health service, the governmental forms.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother being young at that time, of course, and older brother and my grandmother and grandfather and my father out hunting, are all on horses. And her water broke, and she didn't want to be either. She thinking maybe I would they want me to be born or taken away because I was born illegally. And so she waddled 3 miles to the hospital,
Mm.
and my father arrived there and in time. So you think 3 miles at that time, and how did a woman survive? You know, the resilience to go along the way and ask the trees and the water and the earth and the birds and the cloud and the clouds and the light and all the life that was there supporting her, to constantly ask them on the way to help her.
Mm.
Not just God, you know, it was, or I'm doing this on my own. No, it's all that help that got her there. So, and I think that's part of the the understanding how to live in this society. And as you remember, Virgil Killstreet,
Mm-hmm.
it was before that, maybe 20 years before, in the early 80s, I think it was. I was in a class of his, and people were asking the same kind of questions. How do you live without being assimilated? How do you live? And he basically said, you know, that's very good to ask, and good to ask that question. But if you really think about it, is that that's trying to split us apart, divide us.
Mm-hmm.
So what he said was, I am one Lakota living in one world, and there's room for everybody in that world. And it's more true than not. Is like that's part of it. And then to learn the concepts of, oh, there is no word for domination or concept for domination. There's really no word for ownership. There's really no word for I and aloneness. Because when you're alone, it's easier to be isolated, and actually you begin to look for help because you're away from that thought process of being with all of it. And so in this way, I speak this language. I have to kick in another way of thinking, and it seems like I'm always explaining myself, right? And there's little acceptance if I don't speak the proper English or the more scholarly or the educated way, so that I am kowtowing to giving it to people. And so that's presenting. So it's like I have to represent the whole of my nation. It's kind of true, but actually I'm more about representing the earth in another thought process, right? So I think part of that going between two worlds is not very much true for me. I try to do that, and I felt conflict all the time. So now I'm here, and I see that everything has energy. Everything is meant to be this way. Everything is medicine. whether we use it properly or not. This is what's going on. And someday, maybe when we can't extract anymore out of the earth, then maybe that's when the earth will really truly know how to give by taking everything away.
Mm. Yeah, I was really taken with the story of your mother. That sense that we do have what we need; it's all around us, and the world is resilient, life is resilient. We're surrounded. We are resilient, but we lose sight of that, and then we think we have to extract and own and produce and yeah, and that's part of the time thing you were thinking about, because actually right in this moment we always have what we need. It's like I'm worried about whether I'm going to have what I need 2 moments from now or a week from now, and therefore I better extract and package and store and own and write all that. Yeah.
Mm.
I wanted to ask you about your feelings about where we are with the COVID-19 pandemic. This has been quite an experience for all of humanity to go through something together. There seems like there could be a lot of positive things in that, a real positive teaching, some kind of, and at the same time, it's separating us in many ways because of the need to do physical distancing and wear masks, and then also the divisiveness, and where we have such a polarized political landscape today that everything gets weaponized, even medical things, even taking care of ourselves. And we're all kind of hoping, waiting for it to be over, and yet I'm just reading recently there's another Omicron variant that looks like it could be more serious and even more virulent, and maybe does lead to serious. Like it doesn't seem like it wants to go away. And I've heard that some a friend of mine shared what one indigenous elder shared with him was, well, it'll go away when we get the lesson, or it'll go away when we've actually changed who we're being and how we're being, or something like that. But anyway, I wonder what it's been like for you and your feeling about where we are with all this, and what kind of teaching is it, or what is it, an opportunity? What is it for us?
Thank you for that. In the beginning, when I returned to this continent in early March of 2020, I heard about it in Australia and New Zealand and Hawaii, and you could feel like the storm coming. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, is this the storm that they're talking about when I was standing at Wounded Knee? They were talking about the storm that's coming, and it comes in many forms, not just lightning and thunder, and the viruses come in all forms. It's not just what we see as that bacterium or that virus or whatever, that things that we cannot see. It could be in thought processes. So when I came back here, I received some phone calls and communique from back home, the names I cannot give, but they said to create 33 prayer ties in a certain color and where to put them. And mind you, there is really not the thought process of superstition or myth, because that practical mystery that Native peoples are forgetting now is actually listening to how the earth is doing these things, telling you that, okay, well, I'm bringing you another wake-up call. I'm bringing you the intelligence of a virus. So how do we understand that? Is that I was told a little later that I needed to make these prayer ties, 33 of them, and also to have a fire every week, every 7 days or so, for 33 weeks. And so that year of 2020, that's what happened. And the fires were myself and some friends, was just me at first, and then friends start coming. And I said, this fire is not wanting fear. It's not wanting any of those scientific conflicts to attack the enemy. This is how we're going to overcome that which is natural. So it's not really that we can overcome nature by making everything nature enemy. So that those walls are brought down. So we had no agenda fires. And as interesting as we went along, we didn't talk about religion. We didn't talk about science. We didn't talk about a lot of things that normally, taxes, property rates, the voting, there was also a little tinge of that, but it quickly went away. That we were here to watch how the fire dealt with us. So we would come and some of us would sit in silence and just be amazed by what we were missing. So those 33 intelligences that we were missing is actually coming true now. You see it, the earth was showing us the processes is that, first of all, if you put fear in front of it, that's the first virus. And so all through that time, I could hear the news, I could listen to the radio and watch people in panic. And it doesn't mean that, you stop people from making their choice, right? And that's the polemics of it. If you're not up with us, then you're against us. That binary thinking of cause and effect. And yet the earth actually was telling us you can use the medicines. Even the virus is a medicine. And it's not that you wanted humans to succumb to it, but the fact that we weren't going past the human aspect of watching the earth make somewhat of a comeback, but also watching the earth offer the medicines about how to overcome ourselves with our ego, with our ego science, our ego religions, our ego governments. So it's all based on the human. And yet when these animals showed up and the birds showed up, they were like tuned into something. It was like Noah's Ark, if I could say that happened. And even the stars were showing us by the fireballs that showed up, with the energy that was showing up, with the bear that showed up, all these things that were happening. This is what I was watching and observing, and how much they came to acknowledge this is how you do things.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it is certainly, it's radically changed my life. I know it's changed many. We know that at least initially there was this huge window where we weren't pumping so much carbon into the atmosphere. And as I'm sure, like the earth was probably taking a huge breath of fresh air. And, I was a road warrior traveling every week before the pandemic and, out in the world doing good work. But I was always concerned about the carbon footprint of that travel. And, but, since the pandemic hit, I'm here in one place. I've traveled once since it started. I did go to Europe this past November for the Auschwitz Bearing Witness Retreat, where you've been. We've been there together. But other than that, I've been at home with my wife, and we're gardening, and I've been staying in one place. And I haven't really lived in one place and just stayed in one place for a long, long time. So it has changed our lives, and I sometimes wonder whether we're going to get a message and simplify. I think a lot of people are. I think there's also probably a pent-up desire just to get back to business as usual and the way things have been going. But I think a lot of people are getting the message and slowing down and simplifying. I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, I like those thought processes. I think the earth is showing how sovereign she can be without us, and that we do need her, and the fact that we need to know how she needs us, because it's been a one-way street. We need her, but she's trying to show us how she needs us to be in respect, to not travel so much, like you say, but also to think generationally. Is that, okay, this is all about you and your generation? Isn't it about the one that you can't name? Generation X, Generation Z. Isn't it about that? Because that's what automatically is happening in life, really. All the other elements that we're leaving out here, they also are still relating to each other. And that's one thing that we haven't been doing for thousands of years now, in a sense, because we've been at war, not just with humans, excuse me, but with Earth. So we're at war with the earth because of our language and objectifying and subjecting her to to an onslaught of war and peace, and there's no in between. Now, what about those humans and that are in between without being animistic? Because that's a category that hasn't even been well thought out, well felt. Is that maybe there's something to be in putting the earth first in our languages? Maybe
Mhm.
that's the ultimate library. But it's too hard to come out of an addiction. I think that's what we're in, addiction of not knowing what grief is. We tend to want to have psychology and workshops about addiction, and we don't even know what that is because we go out and drink the Kool-Aid. Well, I'll go out and drink the Kool-Aid right after this interview. I'll go out and have something that was produced someplace in China or someplace, and that is really has to be at a level of, what if this food, this process, this privilege stopped? And I think that's what happened. It's like, wait, you guys are forgetting that you're only a human. You can't be greater than the earth because you're not the message. The message is earth. So maybe it's part of us looking at this Midako Oyasi even more so, that we all related in the sense that the relationship is speaking not just only through us but all other life, and maybe that's what it's about, that the energy is not being used in a good way or properly, in a sense, putting the earth first and continuing to uh, make decisions through her first rather than through the bank. I think that's either we saved a lot or we spent too much. We're basing our value on how much that is and what's mine, and maybe it's that ownership that's getting in our way. Um, and as you know, I don't own much, and I don't want to because I know how that feels inside here. Um, I can recycle, but that's kind of exterior. Am I recycling something in here?
Mm.
I don't think that's possible. It's just there. Yeah. Yeah.
You spoke before about being close to the elements, and even growing up, having that experience of being close to the elements. And I know for me, I feel generally, I feel blessed to be able to find a lot of joy and happiness in my life continually. But one of the really happy times of my life, maybe it was just because I was young and carefree, but I lived in Peru for a number of years and lived just in a subsistence way, growing food and sitting around a fire every night and taking bathing in a cold stream and being in the hot sun. And there was very little. We had kind of an simple adobe house with a dirt floor and a thatched roof, and we were very close to the elements. And I lived that way for several years, and it's very nurturing to live that close to the earth. It's so much simpler, and it just I think there's something about being closer to the elements actually heals us, and helps us be more resilient and so forth.
Mm.
And it's hard for us to do. There's so many of us on the earth now. We have these huge urban centers and so forth. So, all the ways. I feel blessed. I live out in a small New England village now with my wife Sophie, and we're just maybe 50 yards from the Connecticut River. It's right out our back door and surrounded by farms. We have a garden. We get most of our food from local farms, and we bought a wood stove. So a lot of time I have a fire going, so been able to recreate that somewhat, but it is modern life. There's something about the way we try to insulate ourselves from the elements that has disconnected us from the very source of our beingness and resilience.
It is just you reminded me of a story again. My mother is when she felt sick, she would go to this place of a piece of ground, very dark earth, and she would remove the first layer, probably her body length, and she would lay there maybe for 20 minutes to an hour and just lay on this dirt, the earth.
Mm.
And then she'd get up and like a new person. And like I asked her, what is that? And she would say, shka shka. It's basically the energy behind the energy that's moving everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the earth. And so she described it as her body was drinking the intelligence of the earth and balancing all her body out, because that's the same thing. And and I couldn't go down to Fifth Avenue in New York and say, you need to come to the earth and jump in a mud pile or something like that. And it's for free, by the way. But instead we'll make it, we'll advertise it, and we'll cost you for going out there and digging that mud up and making it heated up, and that you're going to go have a mud bath. So it's the same thing, but you won't get the same out of it. Yes, the earth doesn't care, but yet it's what we are relieving it as it is, instead of trying to change it. So my mother did that all through her years. Even now, she's 88 years old, and she still refers to the earth. She tells me those stories about taking a piece of that mineral-rich, dark soil and putting it in her mouth, right? Which you weren't supposed to do. But then you read further, that's what women did out through the ages, even in Europe and other places. And they're still doing that. And, many of the people that traveled over time, that this 2 years that traveled, there was whittled down to, well, now we know that the most of the world did not travel anyway. It was only those who could, in that privilege of being able to travel. Like how many percentage of the US citizens have a passport? And, so there's certain places that you cannot go. And these places that we describe as, what am I saying now? It's a place where humans don't live, is where this energy is.
Mm-hmm.
So humans are chasing all the energy out. And because of our extraction thoughts and physical material extraction, we're making those places poor by the mining. We're making poverty for animals. We've made poverty for indigenous peoples because we put them out there on the reservations. They can't participate, but only if they say the things that we want them to say. And they go to our schools, and therefore we can tolerate them and tell them what to say. So, and in that way, are we telling the earth what to say, how to make it? We can change her to make it accommodating for us. Maybe it's the other way around. We have to accommodate the earth now. Yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I always, by my mind, my way of thinking, my being, expanding, relaxing, moving into what we, as you know, in the Zen Peacemakers, we talk about not knowing, right? And so I just so enjoy being in conversation with you. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom with our summit audience today.
Well, cool. Thank you. Anytime, Fleet. And I think we could be doing this again. And yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be here again.
Yeah. It's an honor for us to have you. Thank you so much. Tiokasin Ghosthorse of First Voices Radio and Akantu Institute, and encourage people to explore your work and your music. And it's just been really good. I wish you all the best.
Good. Thank you.
Siguli swagwag, gala hindi niyo gets, wagisli wagini wakitoloda, onida and guahuanaga, ani, bojor, tatse, okinapi, how. Again, I want to hopefully you're enjoyed that and got something out of it. I will post the VOD up after the stream so that you have access to this. We have one more speaker we're going to share, who is an 18-year-old Mexican climate activist. And she is, her name is Xiye Bastida, and she's been doing climate justice activism and as one of the leading organizers of Fridays for Future New York City, and she worked with the People's Climate Movement to mobilize the city for climate legislation. In 2020, Z co-founded Re-Earth Initiative, an international youth-led organization promoting inclusivity in the climate movement, and she speaks out about the importance of recognizing inequalities faced by the climate crisis and addresses the wisdom and philosophy of the Otomi Totek peoples. And she also speaks about gender justice and intergenerational cooperation. And she now studies environmental studies at the University of Pennsylvania. So she is she's she's a go-getter, to say the least. And she is educating herself and learning. Um, Beyond her years almost. Uh, I look forward to that. What I'd like to do in the meantime, however, is I like people to be able to get up, to have a little stretch, maybe grab a snack, grab a drink, refresh your coffee or tea, whatever you happen to be having. So I'm going to play a rendition of the Peaceful Warrior in the meantime, to give you a couple minutes to do that. So I'm gonna get my mug off the screen here again. We'll get started with the Peaceful Warrior. I'm gonna share this time a rendition that was done by um, a German streamer who did it a little bit of a interesting rendition. So let's go with this. This is Amadeus music.
My name is Kaluti, I'm at a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. So what am I doing here and what do I want to say? Is that this world has to change its way. There will be battle for red, white, yellow, black. I'll fight for the ones who can't fight back, and I'll make my stand with a paper and a pen. You want to argue that? Go back and bet again, cause you're never gonna win against what I stand for. So sit down, shut up, and listen as I give you my grand tour. I'm gonna target the corruption in the government. I'm gonna target the poison in our environment. I'm gonna target the injustices to the people. I'm gonna hit every target, or I won't keep still. I will battle the battle of the battles, and I will shake up the cage until it rattles. You're never gonna get rid of me, not until the problems of the world are cut at their knee. Let me nick this one out one more time, so crystal clear is the message in my rhyme. My name is Kaluitin, I'm a war elf for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. I'll battle for the ones who can't fight back. Someone's got to make the people aware. Someone's got to make everyone care. So pass the message on if you dare. Whether it's mine or yours, we all gotta share. Because there must power in one man's voice than all the weapons of military choice. So let's put your voice with my voice, and we can shout out loud that we belong to the human race, and we are proud. Devastated through the actions of men with minds of hatred. Look at Hitler, Charlie Manson, and even Osama. These are the men who have caused us trauma. Then we have cops with hookers in the back seats, and we have punkers, teens knifing each other in the streets. We drug dealers hooking up kids with crack. Why there's a lot of shit in the world, that's just whack. We have men who stand up for their rights and get shot down. You better bend down there, just cause we heading into the next round. There's no getting through war without losses. Lennon, King, Kennedy, and Gandhi are all symbolic crosses. I said my name is Kaluiti, and I am at a war for peace. All senseless attacks must cease, but I can move this world all alone. So just remember that this is also your home. My name is Kaluti, I'm a war app for peace. All senseless attacks must cease, but I can move this world all alone. So just remember that this is also your home. So if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us and things gonna get better. Are gonna get better. Yeah, so if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna hear us and things are gonna get better. The people are gonna hear us and voice are gonna shout together. So if you put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us, things gonna get better. If we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us, things are gonna get better. So if you put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us, things are gonna get better. So if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us, things are gonna get better. So if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. Then people are gonna hear us, things are gonna get better. So if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. People are gonna hear us, things are gonna get better. So if you put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna hear us, things gonna get better. So if we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. People are gonna hear us. voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. So we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. So we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. So we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. So we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. So we put my voice with your voice, we can shout together. The people are gonna use things are gonna get better. My name is Kaluiti, and I'm a warrior for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. So what am I doing here, and what do I want to say is that this world has to change its way.
Greg.
All righty.
And so I hope you got your drinks and snacks together and are ready to continue. So this next speaker again is an 18-year-old Mexican climate justice activist who is coming to talk, named Xiye Bastida. I think that's how it's pronounced, but you'll hear it pronounced in the talk anyway. So I'm going to get my mug up to screen again, and then we'll proceed with our next talk. So let me go here.
Hi, welcome to this session on day 6 of the Global Resilience Summit. My name is Sandy Inkster, and I'm really excited to be here today with Xiye Bastida. Welcome, Xiye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we begin the conversation, I'd like to let our audience know a little bit about you and your amazing climate justice work and youth leadership. Xiye Bastida is a Mexican 18-year-old climate justice activist. As one of the leading organizers of Fridays for Future NYC, she worked with People's Climate Movement to mobilize the city for climate legislation. In 2020, Xiye co-founded Re-Earth Initiative, reearthin.org, an international youth-led organization promoting inclusivity in the climate movement. Xiye speaks about the importance of recognizing inequalities faced by the climate crisis and addresses the wisdom and philosophy of Otomi Toltec peoples. She also speaks about gender justice and intergenerational cooperation. Xiye now studies environmental studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Xiye received the Spirit of the UN Award in 2018, has the opening chapter in the book All We Can Save, is featured in the book Vital Voices, 100 Women Using Their Power to Empower, and has been voted as most likely to save the planet by Refinery 29. Thank you, and congratulations, Xiye.
Thank you so much.
So Xiye, let's start with your amazing story of becoming a prominent young climate justice activist. You organized school strikes, inspired by your fellow activist Greta Thunberg. You organized a climate strike September 20th, 2019, with 300,000 people striking in New York City and marching through Wall Street. And that same month, you participated on a United Nations panel on climate change, meeting Al Gore, and you've collaborated with Jane Fonda, who credits you and the youth climate activist movement with inspiring her very own climate activism. And you are only 18. How did all this start? Would you share your story with us?
Yeah, of course. I feel like a lot of people think that there's a moment that makes you a climate activist or makes you want to fight for Mother Earth. But it's important to note that it's not only a process, but it's also, an accumulation of events or accumulation of knowledge that you you absorb. And a lot of the times it can be one moment, it can be one picture, it can be one instance, it can be one spark that shifts the way you look at the world. But for me personally, it was the way I was raised with an indigenous philosophy lens. So, my dad is Otomi Toltec, which is an indigenous community in central Mexico, and I was born and raised in Mexico. With this knowledge with this philosophy of reciprocity, philosophy of we take care of Mother Earth because Mother Earth takes care of us. So I thought that everybody saw the world the same way I did, because I feel like that's something that you feel when you're growing up. So when I started seeing this, disconnect, and people profiting off of extraction, profiting off of exploitation and pollution, it just didn't make sense why we were rewarding all of the systems that were hurting Mother Earth. And in 2015, my hometown suffered from flooding. And by that point, I had heard about the climate crisis and I had heard about global warming and the greenhouse gas effect, but I did not know that it was already happening. I thought, like most of us, that it was going to happen in 100 years, in 2100. But the reality is that it's not only already happening, but also affecting those communities that are the most vulnerable and the least likely to be able to build back better and build back stronger and come back from climate disasters. So that was what showed me that, I had to act, that I couldn't wait, because the climate crisis was already happening.
Thank you. It's interesting that you referenced the 100 years of a flood. I experienced that situation just 2 years ago. And 4 years ago, they talked about the high water in that instance being the 100-year flood. But yet then 2 years later, it was a more severe flood. So it is interesting that it could be a culmination of events, or it could be one event, as you mentioned, that kind of gives rise to your awareness of what's happening. I was thinking as well about, with what you were talking about, your upbringing and how you were raised. As a grandmother, my heart opens with love and compassion when I watch your well-known TED Talk, the one that was presented in the form of a letter written to your abuelita, your grandmother in Mexico. In that letter, you talked about being inspired by the wisdom, resilience, and dedication of your grandparents and parents, struggling and fighting for decades to protect the earth and sacred indigenous sites. Would you share some stories from your family and your childhood in Mexico that inspired you to do the work that you're doing now, continuing with what you already started to talk about?
Yeah, of course. Just to give you some context, my town is about 40 minutes away from Mexico City to the west. And it's also a town that used to be actually an island because it was surrounded by water. And around 50 years ago, I think 60 years ago now, Mexico City started taking water away from our lake to supply the needs of Mexico City, which was a fast-growing city. Since back then, when my grandfather was young, we were already seeing all of our tradition and culture being taken away because of this growth, like exponential growth, without taking care of people, without taking consideration of people's well-beings and the surrounding areas. So that's like really where my family struggle started. And in Mexico, we have these systems called ejidos, where there's not individual land ownership, but there's communal land ownership. So it's also really common in indigenous communities, where a whole community owns a piece of land. And lately, there's companies that have come in, international, transnational companies that have come in to buy off that land, offering people maybe $1 million pesos, which is not that much money in dollars, and definitely not even close to the money that these companies end up making with these projects. So it's taking land away from us, buying off land, and when they actually do the projects, they don't even do them with indigenous knowledge embedded in them. So, for example, there's this university that was built, and that's the neighboring town. So the indigenous group of that town said, you can't build this university because this is a wetland and it's actually going to sink. And the people said, we have a lot of experts that have looked at the land and it's fine. So they built the university, and right now it's an uncompleted project because it's half sunk. And that was detrimental to the aquifer right there, and also obviously all the money that was spent on the building. So I feel like that just goes to show that there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be included in all of these projects, but also the intergenerational kind of suffering that many communities are going through.
Yes, when you mention about the generations, I recall hearing in one of your other interviews, that you were speaking about the generation and which generation should be caring for the earth. Do you have recall of that?
Yes. So I remember talking about regeneration because, it's a play on word on generation, but also the fact that we need to regenerate and live in a regenerative fashion and do activism in a regenerative fashion. Because if there's something that my grandmother taught me is resilience. And I talk about this in my TED Talk. My grandmother had to go every day to Mexico City for 30 years to sell food to sustain our family and, my dad and my dad's siblings. And that is just a really special kind of resilience that, I thought that I got tired doing activism 1 year, and seeing that my grandmother endured a lot of challenges for over 30 years really not only inspired me to actually kind of own my place in the activism space, but also to know how do we actually sustain ourselves in that process, because we cannot afford for all climate activists to just burn out in the first 2 or 3 years of their activism. That's why we need to make this a regenerative process, one in which we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the planet. And I think that that's a very important value that we need to internalize. And that's how Indigenous peoples live their lives, living their life in a way that actively takes care of Mother Earth, but also takes care of community and takes care of the self. So that's something that I'm trying to share within the activism community and beyond.
So how can we come together to create the resilience that we need to survive and thrive amidst all these daunting challenges?
I think that, right now we are still in a system that is very individualistic in a way. A lot of people, there are systems that are geared towards us caring only about ourselves or only about our areas of interest. So there's a lot of disconnect between the whole, the community and unity, not only in international terms, but also just the people who you live next to, the people who you're supposed to talk to, and, intergenerationally as well. In Indigenous communities, there's a lot of youth and elder conversations, youth and elder circles, where youth learn from the wisdom of elders, and elders kind of get inspired to keep being resilient by the energy of youth, right? So there's this kind of cycle of wisdom going around and energy going around that keeps all generations, together, coherent. And I think that's what we're lacking. I think that's what's preventing us from coming together, is that we're not having enough cross-sectoral, intersectional, intergenerational conversations and solutions. Because at the end of the day, the climate crisis is something that affects all sectors, which means that all sectors need to be engaged to solve it.
Clearly, you and your fellow youth activists are calling in the rest of us in strike with us, the boomers, Generation Xers, and millennials, to wake up and take this climate crisis seriously, like to take real action. And I'm just curious, what are you noticing about your message and how it's being received by those of us in these other generations? So I'm thinking about, I'm in the boomer generation, and I'm thinking about, I'm at the young end. So the elders or the people who may not have the technology, who may not be connected. And then, of course, the younger, millennials. I'm just curious what you're noticing.
Thank you for that question. And it's something that we've actually had to evolve, like in the climate movement. At the beginning of it, when it was youth kind of starting to strike, the messaging was actually, you're stealing our future. Stop stealing our future, kind of a blame game. And I thought that wasn't constructive. I thought that it should be about cooperation. I thought it should be about us as youth not having stakehold in all of the places where decisions are made, So there's actually conversations that need to happen, not alienation, because we're not going to solve the climate crisis by putting people, just like pushing people away. And that's why we started with Strike With Us messaging, cooperative messaging. And I think that it has been really well received, because at the beginning of our strikes, it was only youth. And at the September 20th climate strike, it was everyone, right? It was youth, parents, college students, grandparents, even like older politicians, younger politicians. It was just so beautiful. Not only diversity of backgrounds, but diversity of age. And I think that that's something that we're really proud of, because also recognizing that the climate movement didn't start with us, right? There's people who have done decades of work in the climate movement. There's organizations that are 50 years old. And beyond that, indigenous communities have been taking care of the earth and have that teaching for thousands of years. So it shows that it's not our generation just coming in and saying, this is what we need to do, but we're actually building off of years and decades of already done work. And I think that why we need youth is because of the element of urgency. But beyond that, there's a lot of foundation that's already there.
I got goosebumps when you were talking about the representation at that march. It was really fantastic. So what is it like for you to be 18 years old? I think you're about to be 19, and consider the possibility that you or your children and grandchildren might not have a viable future here on our Mother Earth. You know, in a few hours, I'm going to be holding and rocking my 5-week-old grandson in my arms. And I just can't imagine, you know, having that thought. What will be here for him?
Yeah, this is actually something that I've thought about a lot, because, you know, I made the mistake of reading Uninhabitable Earth while I was at the beach. And the thought that came to my mind was, you know, beaches take thousands of years to form. You know, the movement of the waves that needs to happen for sand to form takes a really long time. And sea level rise can put that underwater in, you know, 10 years, 20 years. So that thinking for me just showed me that how fragile like everything that we know can be. But it also made me think about my kids and my grandkids and the world they're going to live in. So that's why I center all of my climate justice activism in ultimately preserving joy, because that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the joy of future generations. We're fighting for their right to have stability, to have happiness, to pursue their dreams. And I think that's the most important thing, that we're doing this from a place of stubborn optimism of we can change, we have to change, we have the innovation to change, we have the energy. And that's why when thinking about the future, I know how daunting it can be in our current path, but I also know how hard people are fighting to preserve the joy of not only our generation but future generations.
I want to go back, Xiye. You had mentioned earlier about Indigenous teaching, and that it's not new. For some cultures, they've been embracing this and speaking this message for a while. And so you are also an Indigenous rights activist. Could you talk about the connection between Indigenous rights, preserving the traditional Indigenous life pathways, preventing climate disasters, and learning to live sustainably here on Mother Earth?
Yeah, and I think that, as your question very wisely whipped together, all of those things go together. Because when we think about the systems that perpetuate the climate crisis, is the infrastructure that perpetuates the climate crisis. Pipelines where oil spills happen, all of these things go through Indigenous land, most of the time. That's why we see a lot of Indigenous communities rising up and protesting all of the pipelines happening right now with Line 7, and we know what's going on. So I feel like people need to understand that the climate crisis is not only about climate disasters, but actually about the pollution and harm that the infrastructure that causes and perpetuates the climate crisis is having on Indigenous communities. And that's where Indigenous rights come in, because, there's this declaration of United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And, the articles say Indigenous peoples have the right to security, have the right to happiness, have the right to a nationality, have the right to be recognized. And all of these things are not happening, mainly because the United Nations might not be able to enforce this in every country. But then it's up to us as, advocates and citizens of the world to demand our individual countries to recognize the rights of Indigenous peoples. And I'm sure a lot of you know this statistic, but 85% of the biodiversity around the world is taken care of by Indigenous communities, who are only 5% of the world's population. So Indigenous people are just so instrumental in taking care of biodiversity, taking care of the oxygen that we breathe and the stability of Mother Earth. So it's not fair that the burden of pollution extraction is being put on us. And, at the end of the day, all of the climate disasters that are going to come after that. And, to that, I will add that that's why Indigenous philosophy is so important, because, right now we're in a system where even our international relations, what I learned in school is that we are going to war for money and power, and that's what countries care about, or all of this thinking. And when I learn about the environment in school, I always have the tragedy of the commons given to me. That's the first reading that they give me. And the tragedy of the commons basically says, if there's no system, humans will destroy the earth and they will ultimately destroy each other. And I'm like, you have to trust people to take care of Mother Earth, because that's what Indigenous peoples have been doing. You have to actually trust people that that's actually possible, and there's systems to do that without having to create markets, without having to monetize off of natural resources, which should not be called natural resources. But I think that's how all of that weaves in together. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for your their very thoughtful and informed response. I have been connected with about 6 or 7 different Indigenous communities here, and I just know from their internal perspective that it is a battle. The small communities trying to inform the rest of the world, the rest of the outside community, why it's harmful to taint water, our most precious resource. And so thank you very much. Now, you mentioned earlier too about hope, and I heard optimism. So despite all the dangers that we are facing and the sadness of what we're doing to our home and our fellow species,
Sorry about that. I was multitasking. Where were we?
We have the right to be recognized. And all of these things are not happening, mainly because the United Nations might not be able to enforce this in every country. But then it's up to us as, advocates and citizens of the world to demand our individual countries to recognize the rights of Indigenous peoples. And I'm sure a lot of you know this statistic, but 85% of the biodiversity around the world is taken care of by Indigenous communities, who are only 5% of the world's population. So Indigenous people are just so instrumental in taking care of biodiversity, taking And when I learn about the environment in school, I always have the tragedy of the commons given to me. That's the first reading that they give me. And the tragedy of the commons basically says, if there's no system, humans will destroy the earth and they will ultimately destroy each other. And I'm like, you have to trust people to take care of Mother Earth, because that's what indigenous peoples have been doing. You have to actually trust people that that's actually possible and their systems to do that without having to create markets, without having to monetize off of natural resources, which should not be called natural resources. But I think that's how all of that weaves in together. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for your their very thoughtful and informed response. I have been connected with about 6 or 7 different Indigenous communities here, and I just know from their internal perspective that it is a battle. The small communities trying to inform the rest of the world, the rest of the outside community, why it's harmful to taint water, you know, our most precious resource. And so thank you very much. Now, you mentioned earlier too about hope, and I heard optimism. So despite all the dangers that we are facing and the sadness of what we're doing to our home and our fellow species, Xiye, you appear to remain very positive and optimistic. I hear that and I see that in your action. You've said that hope and optimism are our most powerful tools. How do you manage to remain optimistic in the face of the climate emergency we're facing and with all the obstacles to change? Some, like you've already mentioned, greed, materialism, divisive politics, resistance to change.
One of the reasons why I am optimistic is because the climate crisis is the greatest challenge that we've ever faced, but that means that it's our biggest opportunity to come together. And I think that it really depends on how you look at it, because, you know, the climate crisis is violent, is perpetuated by violence, and it ultimately causes violence when natural disasters come. And that means that the solutions need to counter all of that with positivity and love and resiliency and action and hope. So I think that our solution for the climate crisis is just knowing that our innovation, knowing that our power of unity, all of those things can have to come together to counteract the climate crisis. And like I mentioned before, my grandmother is really a great source of inspiration for me, for, you know, how she still laughs to this day. She's 88 years old and she's always laughing, always lighting up every room. Knowing that she had to stay resilient for a lot of years, and she is still staying resilient. So I think that we have a lot to learn from each other. And that's why it's also so important to shift from that individualistic perspective that you talked about to that community care perspective, not only within ourselves and our families, but globally.
There are 2 things that arise for me out of what you just shared. And the one was, I think you've referenced the music in their home as well, too, your grandparents. And I'm just thinking about that being part of their resilience, that music somehow keeps them lighthearted. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, and I've noticed that in myself as well, you know, and just when we strike and when we're marching down the street, what's keeping us going is, you know, how lively it feels, the music that people are playing, the bands that are, marching with us. And then at the end, the performances that bring people together, that fill up people with spirit. And I think that, you know, music is just such a universal language, such a heart, you know, you can feel the beat, you can feel, you know, it's not something that you get told like beyond lyrics, right? The music is something that you can really, you can share that feeling of inspiration and share that feeling of unity. So I, you know, just from growing up in Mexican household where there's always music, there's always celebration, there's always parties happening, you know, from quinceañeras to like bodas and, you know, all of these different celebrations. I think that I've put that into my own activism and learned to celebrate our wins, because if we don't celebrate, then it feels like what we're doing is not is not having impact. When we see that impact, it's important to like recognize that. And music is a huge part of that, because it's just, like I said, such a universal language for what our feelings are and what, the feelings that we want to project.
I get the sense, even when you're speaking about it, that energy and uplifting. The second thing that I wanted to reference was when you were talking about going from individual to community, and what came to mind for me was a reference that you made to the cups, the coffee cups, that perhaps we can't go to each person individually, but we go to the source. So what came to mind for me was treating the cause. Would you like to expand on that story or that thought?
Yeah, 100%. So for those of you who don't know the coffee cup story, basically, I don't think it was even a coffee cup. I think it was just like a piece, like a sandwich wrapper or something. But it was made out of cardboard in a store that I'm not going to mention. But I was there and I was like, oh, this is so great. The sandwich is packed on a cardboard box, so I can just recycle it. But looking closer to it, I realized that it had like a shiny interior, and I started peeling it off, and it was a lining of plastic. So I thought to myself in that moment, we cannot expect every person to peel off that shiny interior and then throw that away in the trash and then recycle the box. But we can ask the company to just stop making the wrapper that way. And so that's when the difference between individual action and systemic change was just so clear to me, because you could have the best intentions as an individual. You could buy from the best places and buy things that are cardboard wrapped and everything. But if there's this type of systemic, I guess in a metaphor type of way, of systemic linings that you just cannot peel off yourself, you have to go to the source. You have to not lobby, but like organize. I have lobbied several politicians, but I don't know if that's the word for corporations. You have to, ask for that change that comes from the actual manufacturing and planning of different products. And only 9% of plastic gets recycled, which means that, 91% of plastic ends up in our oceans or in landfills. And that is just not going to be solved by metal straws. And that's also why our solution has to come from the source. And our solution is stop producing plastic altogether. We have lived like that before. Plastic is actually really new, and we can go there again. And it actually makes a lot more sense for our health. We're ingesting 5 grams of plastic a week, right now. It's better for our health, better for planetary health, and just better in terms of how we're using our resources.
Thanks for bringing that story to everyone involved in this summit. And I was also wondering, I visited a few of the different websites that you're associated with. And would you like to mention any that people could follow as a means of becoming more informed and perhaps awakening to what they can do?
For sure. So definitely follow Fridays for Future, your local Fridays for Future, to know about strikes happening. Or if Fridays for Future isn't the climate organizer in your location, just investigate or like research what that organization is. And if there's none, there you have a project for yourself, to start the Fridays for Future chapter. Because, striking is just so special. And once COVID is over and we can go back to that, I think that the world is going to see that the momentum for the climate movement has not stopped, that is actually growing. And I'm really excited for people to see that, to see all of the people that we've brought on board from September 20th to our next, fully fleshed out strike. And another organization that you can follow is Re-Earth Initiative. That's the organization that I co-founded about a year ago because of the pandemic and because we couldn't strike. So we do a lot of mainly education, translate all of our toolkits to up to 7 different languages, have webinars, task task forces, workshops on how to think intersectionally, how to act intersectionally, and on all like different very exciting topics. So those are two things that you can go follow. And obviously there are, you know, a lot more resources that I could give you, like read All We Can Save, read like, you know, just, yeah, whatever your interest is connected with climate.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I did look on the Fridays for Future Canada and, well, on the map. So I could see, you know, way up my little place here in Ontario, the marches that occur. So they are listed on the map, which was great. You mentioned about the pandemic. So much of your very successful climate justice activism has been in the streets. But with the shift as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, what has been happening for you? What have you learned during this time of the pandemic?
I think that's a really important question, because I think that, you know, this is one of the few things that is truly universal, and we all went through lockdown and we all went through quarantine. And there's a lot of things that we learned as a movement and me personally. First thing is solidarity. You know, we have that power of solidarity. We stayed at home to save people's lives at the end of the day. And obviously, a lot of places did better than others. And the United States is not one of the places that did the best job at it. But I feel like for the people who did stay home, I think that it taught us about the power of what individual action can have on systemic issues. Another thing that we learned is that I learned, and that a lot of people learned, I think, is self-care. You know, really, I think that a lot of us had to think about our physical health, our mental health. And I realized that I could not take care of the world if I didn't take care of myself. I realized that if I wasn't in a good headspace, if I wasn't taking care of myself and eating 3 times a day and sleeping enough and doing exercise, I couldn't put the energy that I wanted to put into the events that I was being part of, into the projects that I wanted to be part of. So that's a very important lesson as well, self-care. Another one is our communications really changed. So we realized that we were actually excluding a lot of people by having the whole youth climate movement only be centered around striking. Because personally, when I started We Earth Initiative, I had a lot of people from Singapore join. And Singapore is a country where striking is illegal. So, unlike unintentionally, we were keeping a lot of youth from Singapore out of the movement because they couldn't partake in striking. So I think that we learned to be also more inclusive, because technology has shown us that we can be more inclusive. And a lot of people have access to, you know, how can we live stream all of the events that we have that only hold 700 people, but could be watched by thousands, or things like that. So I think that it, you know, there's a lot of things to learn from it. And obviously make sure that we never find ourselves in a similar situation.
Yes, I think that your comment about self-care is very valuable. I heard you reference earlier that you became overwhelmed and that you perhaps weren't getting a lot of sleep, and some of your favorite hobbies, or, you know, your guitar playing and your own personal activities were being sacrificed. And what was your awakening? How did you realize what happened to you during this time when you were giving so much?
So what happened for me was that, you know, I was wanting to do as much as I could because I thought that any less wasn't enough. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. So I was trying to do well in school, apply to college. This was a year ago, so I was still in high school. You know, do speaking events, organize, go to meetings, go to my gymnastics class when I was like already exhausted, do homework. And I was actually in pretty hard classes. I don't know why I did that to myself, but I was in AP Calculus, in AP Physics, and French 4. So I actually had a lot of student responsibilities as well. And I was the leader of the environmental club at my school. So at some point, it was just too much for my body, like not even mentally, because mentally I was so determined, but my body just couldn't take it. So I started having like heart palpitations, where I literally one day I was in class and I collapsed because I couldn't just resist it. And I cannot even imagine why I let myself get to that point, because no one should be at that point. And I went to the hospital and the doctor told me, "You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You just are too stressed." And that's the moment where I realized that I didn't have to put all of the weight of the world on my shoulders, that there's millions of youth and people around the world who also want to be in the climate activism space and who are being drawn to it. So that's why it's so important to share this big task that we have with your community, to feel supported, to live in a regenerative fashion. So ever since, I have actually switched my life around to, I had to give up gymnastics, I had to give up playing guitar, I had to give up a lot of things. But recently I've regained a lot of them. So now I go biking every single day. I make sure I see my friends, make sure I am fulfilling my other needs as a person. So it just makes my activism a lot better. And even in speaking events, like I have a lot more energy, I think a lot better, have better ideas, and I'm doing a lot better in school as well. Just by realizing that one person cannot do it all, and there's a lot of people there to help you.
Yeah, congratulations on that. It's a frightening time to be experiencing what you experienced, and congratulations for bringing back into your life a better balance. I wanted to ask you about, you had mentioned as well that during this time of COVID, the shift and how you became more aware of the perspective that may have been promoted may not have been welcomed or possible in other cultures, in other countries around the world. Has there been anything else that you've learned through that process? And I'm just thinking about we have this opinion of the way to do it, but then all of a sudden, when we listen to others, then we gain more awareness, and it enriches the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because, as youth, we are also really naive sometimes. So we feel like we've discovered the solution and we have the solution and we know what's going to work. And we lose sight of there's different perspectives, there's different needs, there's different aspects that we haven't touched upon. So that's why we have made it like our own organizations that we are creating. We have made it, a requirement, kind of intention, to bring in a lot of diverse voices, making sure that our foundation for all of these organizations are actually diverse enough so that we can have a better representation of solutions. And that's something that we really weren't thinking about before the pandemic, because we were so caught up on how do we get this strike done really quick, that for the sake of efficiency, we weren't thinking holistically. And the pandemic gave us a chance to stop, think, rethink, reimagine what the movement had to be. And it actually made it a lot better. And I feel a lot better with my activism now than I did before, even though I do miss striking a lot. But I know that when we strike, we're going to have this different vision of, listening to others and making it the best it can be for everyone, except the fossil fuel industry, because that's what we're protesting against. But yes.
Well, it was almost as if the pandemic provided a little bit of a regrouping opportunity for the organizations to really reflect and consider how moving forward would look. Any other great shifts that have occurred during that time?
I mean, I cannot think of many, but definitely the administration shift, I think, was a planetary shift. So the fact that we have the Biden administration now, even though there were a lot of other candidates with a lot more climate ambition, it's still, as climate activists, it's so relieving to have people who are actually addressing the climate crisis head on. And addressing issues that I didn't even know we had. So like before being a college student, I didn't know that one of our biggest sectors to tackle was the energy sector, because we can say, oh, let's electrify everything, but all of our electricity is produced by coal and natural gas. So we don't switch where we get our electricity from. Even if we electrify everything, we're still going to be producing even more coal and gas. So, there's a lot of things that there's now experts that are hired. So I don't have to come in and say what I think our solution should be and what our demands are, because now they're at the federal level and international level. There's experts who have come up already with all of the solutions. And I think that's really important, realizing that we already have all of the solutions that we need to not emit CO2 by 2040. We could be completely CO2 free. So that's something that has been life-changing for a lot of activists. Honestly, a huge relief. And knowing that we have a lot of other sectors to tackle, not only our governments, but private industries, companies that we need to push, because they're also part of the solutions that need to come forward.
So much. It's it's exciting, and also I have a lot of appreciation for the efforts that you have made. It's really quite profound. So I would just like to offer you an opportunity to come up with any point that we perhaps didn't address here in this interview, something that you really would like everyone to know about. Any final words for the summit audience?
Well, I think we did touch up on a lot of things. So thank you for the awesome interview questions and all of the research that you did, because literally you hit the truth of every single point that you said. Like sometimes people make up things because they didn't really research. So thank you for that. And something that I would say to the summit audience is that I don't know if I mentioned this already, but you don't have to change yourself to be part of the movement. You don't need to switch your life around. What we need to do is identify what our passion is and exercise that passion through a climate lens, kind of make it our way of life, to think about the planet, to think about our future, to think about our present and community's health through every single thing that we already do. So that's something that I would like to leave you with. We don't need 1,000 perfect climate activists. We need millions of people doing their best.
I think that's very encouraging final words. Thank you very much, Xiye, for your so generously sharing your time and your experience with us here today at this Global Resilience Summit. And thank you very much for your incredible climate justice activism, your leadership, and the call to action. It's inspirational. The passionate climate activism of today's youth is truly a source of great hope and inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Sigoli Swagwag? Wow. She was pretty awesome, I gotta say. I'm so glad that I got that talk. Um, really cool to have heard her and with them, however she identifies. It's great, Xiye. So a couple of things that she did mention. One of them was uh, she mentioned a building ending up half sunk before it was even completed by a company who spoke with experts. Reminds me of the Canadian government saying that they consulted Indigenous leaders regarding a pipeline development, and the ones that they consulted were part of an elected system, which was again set up by the colonial system, not the leaders that are traditional. And so the prime example of that is what is happening in Wet'suwet'en territory, where the traditional hereditary chiefs and their supporters are rallying against the pipeline and have been for over a decade now. So that type of thing is part of what I think she may be talking about when it comes to working with other companies and governments and intergenerational, you know, collaboration. And so we really need kind of everybody to be on the same page if this is going to succeed. So that's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. She also mentioned about connecting with communities and sharing the work as an excellent way of ensuring that you're actually taking care of your own health. Because, people don't need to get into the position that she was in where she's fainting just because she is so stressed out after, doing all this, really pushing her school and her uh, extracurricular activities on top of the activism. And we can all put ourselves into a position of doing a little bit too much. And so we always got to try to remember to take care of ourselves at the same time. So I'm glad that she had mentioned that. And I'm glad that she's kind of had that reflection of, I don't need all of the weight on my shoulders alone. We need to share in this responsibilities, and so every one little thing that each of us can do can add to the whole collective, and that's ultimately what we're looking at doing. So that was a great speak. I will have that VOD up after the stream. So someone had mentioned that they liked my branding video. So I wanted to actually, which I was kind of why we got interrupted there, is I have another quick thing here. So I'm going to show you both of the, I guess, considered if they're considered branding videos, if you will. I'm going to show you the one that I did, or the one for me that was made for me specifically. And I just was sent a new one that was made for Fantastic Kitty, which I haven't actually shared on stream before. So I'm going to take my mug off the screen here again, and I'm going to just play both of them. They're really short. They're not very long, so it should take almost no time to watch them. But I just think that it's so awesome to have some sort of trigger that we can use. So I will start with mine, and then I'll follow it up with Kitty's the brand new one I got for Kitty. So very cute. So I'm going to be adding that as a command um, at some point in the very near future. So we got one for Fantastic Kitty now, and one for Dark Native. So I'm going to get a rendition of the Peaceful Warrior set up so that we can get ready to share some love with somebody else. So I hope that you will all stick around long enough to at least come say hi. Now, for the future, tomorrow's Tuesday, so tomorrow's going to be our music stream. Um, I do have a couple more conversations or chats from the Resilience Summit. Actually, let me just pull this up so I can see who we still have to listen to. Violet Catches. Now she speaks about her childhood and how her indigenous upbringing kept her close to nature, and she's going to share her indigenous teachings to preserve its legacy, which the U.S. government and culture once tried to destroy. She's also going to share about her relationship with the earth and how she was brought up respecting nature. She'll have interesting stories about the natural healing energies in medicine. and sharing indigenous knowledge is so important in preserving this precious history. And she's going to talk about how the modernization did not break her spirit, and in how her traditional indigenous culture and upbringing has kept her humble, loving, and kind. So Violet is born on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation in 1950. So she's also going to be Lakota, and that's her language. And she actually speaks three dialects of the Ochiti Shakowin, or Seven Council Fires languages. Another speaker that we have is going to be, I know I can't say that name, Ilarion Cuyo Mercilife, who speaks on the heartfelt space in which he grew up and where the brain is in the service of the heart and the earth is unburdened. He shares anecdotes on how living in this space was so different from the modern Western culture and how we can learn from coming back to our hearts. He's going to share the impact of how it felt growing up in a traditional upbringing where adults had no demeanor or acts of hate, where everyone was seen as equal, and how being in the heart is difficult, embracing ancestral trauma and large scale imbalance, and how we need to think out of the box when dealing with climate change, and how we need to come from a heart space to deal with the solutions differently from how we created them. So that's another speaker that we will share as and then there's Mona Palaka. Um, she's going to share how indigenous approaches may not have been defined as best practices or evidence based by an external body, yet have been successful, resilient traditions for hundreds of years. And the grandmother's collective concerns and sacred agreement to uphold the protection and the rights of the water, lands, and even giving personhood to the water and to sustain life in this earth by how we conduct ourselves in relationship to the earth. So that's something that we still have to share. Okay. So yes, Kitty. Uh, Knuckles created that. And for those of you who don't know, um, the Knucklehead Club is a community of streamers who just like to share time together. And he is so generous with his time and his creativity, and he has created those graphics that you'll see a lot of the graphics that you'll see on the channel. So I am so grateful for his time and his expertise in making those graphics for our channel, and so I appreciate him for doing that. And as well, his mod, he's got the what they call the super mod in his channel, and that's Don um, Don the Ark. If let's see if I can do this. So Don has been such a as well a super supporter of the channel, and so grateful for all of the support that she has given this channel. She's been super. When I was doing my 24-hour stream, she was here in and out of this stream almost the whole time, and showed an awesome amount of support then, and she was given some awesome support in the last stream. It was she went above and beyond. So I really appreciate having her as part of our community. So let me get a so anyway, yeah. So there's a couple of the speakers that we still have to watch. So that'll be gives us something to look forward to. So I'm gonna get a rendition, as I said, of the Peaceful Warriors started here, and then I'll look for someone to raid while I'm playing the peaceful warrior. I'm going to ask that you copy a raid call because I'll punch in the raid calls then, and then come with us and to whoever we go. Even if you can't stick around for a long time, just come and say hi. And so I'm going to get my mug off the screen. Oh, my mug is off the screen, is it? Okay, there it is. And let's go. We did Andy and Adele last time, so let's do this one.
Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. What are we doing here? What do we really want to say? This world has got to change its way. We're going to battle for the red, white, yellow, and black. Fight for the ones who can't fight back. Oh, we're talking about all the creatures from the water to the sky. Talking about the issues from the truth to the lies. Gonna make my stand with a paper and a pen. You wanna argue that? Go back to bed again. 'Cause you're never gonna win against what I stand for. So sit down and shut up and listen as I give my grand tour. I'm gonna target the corruption in our government, target the poison in our environment, the injustices to the people. And every target I won't keep still. Gonna battle the battle of battles, shake up the cage till it rattles. 'Cause you'll never get rid of me till all of us are free. Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. Gonna fight for the red, white, yellow, and black. Gonna fight for the ones who can't fight back. Let's keep passing around information, improve the planet through education. Make the people aware, make everybody care. Pass my message on if you dare. Mine or yours, we all gotta share. There's more power in one person's voice than any weapon of choice. Our names are Marin Reese, and we're at war for peace. All senseless attacks we see must cease. But we won't be able to move this world all alone. Just remember, this is
How's it
also
going?
your home.
Welcome in, everybody.
So if I put my voice
for
with
1
your
year.
voice,
Oh my God, I'm
we
such
all
a space
shout
cadet.
together.
I love it. I love the
People
followage
gonna
thing.
hear
That is so cool. Wait, 2 years?
They're gonna get
Oh my
better.
God. Holy
Our
schmoly.
names are Marin Reese. We're at war for peace.
Into which a
All
magical place it
senseless
really is.
attacks we
Welcome in,
see
everybody. If you haven't been here
must
before,